Welcome to another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the book to meet the authors and indie professionals in the indie publishing industry. This week I've got a new author to introduce you to, Amber Jaeger.
Hello, everybody. I'm Amber Jaeger. I'm the author of the Hemlock Bay series, and I'm also the author of the King books. The Hemlock Bay series is my first series, and it's complete. You can get it starting on all of the platforms pretty soon, I hope, as I'm uploading right now. And I'm working on my third King novel right now. The King books are more fairy tales, and the Hemlock Bay series is more of a young adult paranormal series.
Very cool. We'll have to look at those books a little bit later on. And I also have Jason returning for a second time on our show. Jason, do you have anything new to tell us this week?
Well, I'm going to try to have lots of new stuff, but I'm still me. I'm still the same guy. Crazy author, addicted to horror and tattoos. And I've got 4 books out right now and just waiting on cover design for the 5th. I've got some of my books sitting on my wall back there. But yeah, I write horrors and thrillers and anything that'll scare you, hopefully.
And you just did a giveaway for 2 of your books. I snatched them for free.
Good.
That was really cool. I can't wait. I can't wait to check them out. That was very exciting.
Awesome.
To see
awesome.
that
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, totally, man.
All right. And David, any new news from you this week?
I am constantly working on several projects at once. I'm doing Spilling Ink as well as Reel It In, which is a show through my production company. And then continuing to develop my board game and also trying to get work done on Onyx.
All right. Very good. Now, remember when we talked to H.D. Gordon, we talked about doing sprints and stuff. Have you started doing any of your sprints to get any words in?
I've been swamped. I've been so swamped. So,
all right. Well, and new for me this week, I don't know if I have shown you guys yet, but I'll give you a little peek over here. I got all of my new bookmarks in.
Sweet.
For all 3 of my series. And I'll be bringing these with me when I go to
Palm Springs
Comic-Con at the end of this month. And I'll be doing a little giveaway with these on my Facebook page later for people who want to snatch up some bookmarks before the event. We're also going to start a new segment this week called Ask the Author to help bring up some topics that readers might want to have us answer each week on our show. So we asked the question, what would you like to know from an author? And we've got a really good question from Joanna Glazer, and I hope I'm saying her name right. And I apologize if I'm not. I know she has watched every one of our episodes, so I'll say hi right now. But she says, cheesy question, but where do you guys get your ideas? I've got a real story that I want to turn into fiction, but I'm at a loss. I'm crafty with objects, but words and ideas are not my forte. And by the way, Jason, she's got your books and she loves them.
Love it. Love it.
So I thought that was a really good question. You know, how do we come up with our characters? How do we craft our stories? And since we've got 4 authors here right now, we all probably have a little different perspective on how it's done. So I'm going to pick on Jason because he's fun to pick on, and I'm going to make him answer the question first.
Well, thank you for the question, first of all. That's awesome. You know, coming up with ideas for myself personally, a lot of my ideas actually come from my wife. She has some of the most bizarre, out-of-this-world, terrify-you dreams. And every once in a while, she'll wake up and she'll be like, man, I had a dream about this or this. And I'm like, oh, you know, I really like that idea. You know, it's really creepy, kind of makes my skin crawl. And so I'll jot it down. I actually have a folder in my Google Docs that's just called Crazy Stuff. And so I've got this huge list of different creepy ideas that have either come to her or come to me or that I've heard from other people. All I really need to come up with a story is one really good scene. If I got that scene in my head, I could say, okay, well, why is this happening? You know, why are these characters doing this? There's one scene in Delia in particular that's a really nasty, violent scene where somebody gets hurt really badly, and it was actually a dream my wife had, and she was telling me about it. I was like, oh, you know, I really like to use that with something. And then I took that idea, and then I took a couple of other ideas. I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to put these characters in this situation and see how it pans out. And from there, I just kind of drew back and built on their backstory and built the rest of the story around it. For me, I don't necessarily have a set idea or a set way of coming up with things. I try to draw from different people and different experiences that I've had to come up with something that might be interesting, whether it's a love scene that, okay, well, I really would like to see where this goes, or something really terrifying, and kind of build the story around it. When I start to think about the big picture right off the bat, a lot of times it gets to be a little overwhelming for me. It may sound silly, but I always try not to think about the ending for as long as I can, because once I have that in my head, I feel like I'm almost cheating the characters out of their opportunity to find their own path by doing so. Those of us who write do know that our characters do kind of do their own thing. We definitely have a plan for them. We've created them. They're kind of our children and a little bit of us as well, but they're going to go where they want to go. And sometimes it's not what we planned. And if I have a really strict outline in place, they don't seem to go there. And I don't like that. So I try to give them a little bit of free rein, but yeah, coming up with ideas, it's an amalgam of a whole bunch of different things. Having a coffee and listening to the people in the booth next to me, which I do all the time. I can't stop myself. And they might be telling a crazy story about something that happened to their brother or their mom or dad. I'm just like, oh man, that really could happen. I'd like to see what would pan out if, there was blood and violence involved somehow. But yeah. So I don't know. That's it. I think that we as authors come up with ideas just like everyone else does. We just either have the mental fortitude or the foolishness to try to put them in a story.
Now, it would be safe to say that you're probably a pantser versus a plotter, right, Jason?
I am, but my good friend, Amber Jaeger, has tried to school me many times on plotting, and on occasion, I've actually had an idea and written a couple scene ideas down, like, okay, I want this character to do this, this, and this. But when I go to actually write it, I will write something completely different, and it's ridiculous. But at times, just thinking of a little bit of outlining can kind of help spur the thoughts along there.
Yeah, you can guide your characters, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go down the path.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and it's good that you say that Amber is kind of the flip side of that. So, Amber, we're going to turn it to you to answer the question from the plotter's perspective.
It's kind of funny, actually. A lot of my ideas come from dreams, actually. The whole start of the Hemlock Bay series, it's in Nightmare Town, this place where the girl goes into her dreams, and that's actually a place that I've dreamed about. So I haven't necessarily dreamed about any of the characters or her or David or any of them, but definitely the places where they live and how they get there and how they move around there. So there's that place. There's another one. I call them towns. There's another town that I'm going to be writing about. I call it Heron Cove. I don't think I'm going to keep that name. But so really the settings really all come from my dreams. And I take notes on them. I draw pictures when I wake up. And it just kind of fits into the other ideas that I kind of try to keep going. It's usually about characters. That's what I really have to think about. And so I do a lot of people watching. And then also like Jason, my characters and some of my stories are really driven by what would my character really do? You come up with these problems that you want your characters to have, because I usually know what the end is. I know what the end of the story is going to be. I usually don't know the middle. That's what I have to kind of work on and plot out. That's where I do the plotting, and that really helps me. But I know what the end's going to be, and I know where I might want my characters to be, and so I kind of work backwards and think about what kind of person would they have to be to get from point A to point B. And Jason's right, sometimes they go off the path, and you're like, oh, that's not what I intended you to be like. It all just kind of comes together. But yeah, the dreams, that's kind of funny. That is a really big one, though. That's where a lot of my ideas come from. And then people watching, and then just thinking and note-taking and drawing weird, terrible little pictures and doodles of things, and then just kind of mulling it all over and putting it together.
People watching seems to be quite a theme with a lot of authors. We're almost like students of humanity. We see how everyone interacts, and we find ways to incorporate that. And in some ways, the people that we watch become our characters. We see their mannerisms. We see how they respond to things, how they act, what they do, the little attitudes, the flip of a hand, And that becomes what our characters do, in the next scene that we write, whether it's conscious or subconscious.
Right.
Now, as far as the plotter versus pantser idea goes, as a plotter, if you have a specific point you want to get your character to, and your character is completely veering off into left field, but you still need them to get back to that point. What do you do to overcome that?
When it comes to the plotting, I actually use worksheets to help me organize my ideas. So it's not a set in stone firm, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to get all the way to the end. It's more like a lady named Laura Willard, and I'll make sure to put a link in here somewhere, but I don't know if you can really see it, but it's kind of a plot line like that, and it includes the major plot points. And so you can see I have my crazy little sticky notes all over them. Those are my scenes that I'm putting over what she calls the 8 C's. So she plots with the 8 C's, and so it lets you kind of get your captivation, your change, your complication, your confrontation, your collapse, comprehension, your curveball, humiliation. I think I'm saying that wrong, but it just helps you organize your ideas, and you can kind of see that it goes up and down to kind of keep you on track of, are things going really well or are they going really bad? And so it just helps me to make sure that everything's in the right place and that I'm moving in a direction that makes sense for my characters. And when I find that I'm not, it's usually me that's the problem and not them. They're usually doing what I want them to do. They're just going in a different direction than I wanted. And so I use things like that. I do use things like character outlines. I have just giant longs, they're like 8 pages long that I print off and I do. And then I also do some scene plotting. So this is like something that I would use getting into like the 3rd or 4th draft of my book. And so it lets me sort of plot scene by scene, who's going to be in it, what time is it happening, what's going on, and what am I hoping to accomplish. Because the other thing it does help me stay on track with is making sure there's not just a bunch of extra crap that I think is really cool but doesn't actually move the story forward. I have that problem. So it's not set in stone. It's something that's really fluid and you can work with, but it definitely helps keep me on track, and it helps me make sure that the story's moving in the direction I want at the pace and the rate that I want.
That's really cool. I'm not a plotter at all. I'm on the pantser side of things, but I do some general outlining, but nothing as meticulous as that. That's like really impressive. And I can see how plotting out like that could help you, write the story faster because going into it what's going to happen in this scene. Whereas, a pantser will sit down at a blinking cursor and go, okay, so what's happening today? Oh, wait, what did I do last time? Gets a little stressful at times trying to figure out what's going to happen in the next scene. And as a pantser, you often just stare at the screen for a while you're thinking it up versus, a plotter goes into it saying, okay, I'm on this scene now. I know what I'm doing. I know what my characters need to do and go.
It is nice, but that like lag time of thinking, it still comes. Mine just comes before I sit down and really write that complete draft. So I do a lot of this sitting at the desk and the thinking and the staring at the page and wondering, is that really good enough? Is that really the solution that I wanted? Did I really show the character and what I wanted to show them, and did they really grow? So it still takes a lot of time. I do 4 drafts before the 4th is the one that I really get the meat of the bones on it. And so the other ones are just kind of putting the little pieces together, or like the main pieces together just in sentences. But even that takes forever. It takes much longer than you would think it would to do like a 2-page outline, essentially, is what the first draft is.
I remember Amber told me when we sat down and chatted about plotting and how she puts things together. It was a neat little analogy of how she does it. She said that she creates the skeleton of the book first, that she'll go through and she'll know what she wants to write, and she'll go and put these major things in place. And then later on, as she gets through her draft, she's adding more connective tissue and muscles and finally the skin over the whole thing. And I thought that was a really neat way of looking at it. That's one of the things that I've always had a tough time with, is going through and doing revisions. I write it all at once. I try to get everything out that I can the first time. And when I try to go back through and revise things, I don't find myself adding a whole lot more to it. I'm going through and I'm looking at, spelling and grammatical errors, but as far as revising content, that's very difficult for me. And so I'll send it out to a few readers, and Amber is one of the readers I usually send things to first and say, hey, will you read through this and tell me some areas that I need to work on? And based on those opinions from my readers, I'll add more history here, or I'll add a little bit more likability or dislikability there. And it can be a real challenge, writing the rough draft, especially if you're excited and you're on your first couple novels and you're just blasting it out there and you're super happy with it. It's a really great experience until you realize that you then have to go through and do a lot of real hard work into making that rough draft into something that's actually readable. It's difficult as a new author or a young author, and I'm not young, but I consider myself a young author because I've only been writing for a few years. It's difficult to understand that what you're reading into your work isn't what everyone else is reading, because you have that story in your head. You know your characters, you know what they look like, you know what they sound like. Sometimes you've even created little movie character personas for them of famous actors or whatever, so you can see them in your head, but other people can't do that. And so I really feel it's extra important to have good beta readers or alpha readers, whatever you want to call them, to go through and say, hey, this part was great, but I don't have any idea why this person would do that. Why are they thinking something like that? Or I have absolutely no connection to this character that you've written an entire book about. And then you're like, okay, well, why in the hell aren't people understanding this if I understand so well? And it takes a lot of not only hard work, but courage to be able to tear apart your own design and kind of rework it that way. But again, having readers and good friends that will be honest with you, I think makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Beta readers, they are one of the best tools in an author's arsenal because, like you said, you're too close to your work. You can't see potential mistakes. You can't see the plot holes. You can't see a character that for some reason hasn't been in a chapter in 4 or 5 chapters, but your beta readers will catch that. I'm working on Fearless Little Werewolf right now, and I've been sending out section by section to 3 different beta readers as I go. They've been able to catch those little things for me. In fact, the missing character was one that I just got called on. It reminded me that it's been probably 10 or so chapters and a character just kind of disappeared. So now I know I've got to go back in and figure out, why did I have him disappear? What's he doing? Give him his backstory again, and then going forward, get him back into the chapters where he should be.
I tried something different with my most recent novel, Deranged, and I don't believe that any of you have actually read it yet, but if you get a chance to read it, it's different than what I've tried to do before in that I wrote it scene by scene, and I had the overall idea in my head of, okay, this is kind of where it's going, and I'm still pretty freeform with everything, but with every scene, we all know what a story arc is. We all know that a story should, build itself up, and then you reach a crescendo, if you will, and then, you have a resolution, or you have a cliffhanger if you're mean and terrible, like somebody I know does with cliffhangers sometimes. But anyhow, with this one, what I tried to do is I had 4 different sets of main characters, if you will. I would alternate chapter by chapter with them, but each chapter would have its own small story arc. And it didn't start out as a purposeful thing, but I would say, okay, well, in this chapter, Cal is trying to break out of this hospital she's imprisoned in. In this chapter, Robert is finding out that, his crops have been decimated by this virus. In this chapter, someone is attacked. And with every chapter, I tried to build that up and let it go into the next one. And I got a really positive response from people that the book just moved really, really quickly. There wasn't downtime for people. And I don't do that with everything. And like I said, it was my first time trying it. But if you're just starting to write, or if you've been writing a while and finding yourself in a slump, it was kind of an interesting way to do it. And it also kept me engaged with people because I knew that, okay, something cool is going to happen here. And it's not just, okay, this is a chapter full of backstory. I just got to slog through this so people know the characters. But even in your backstory, if something exciting happens with every little scene, I found it helped me move, and it helped readers through the story really well.
To constantly give them little payoffs and stuff?
Exactly. And my 2 favorite authors are Michael Crichton and Stephen King. And that's mostly because I'm old and because they're amazing. One thing that was always challenging for me, especially with King, is that it always took me 100 pages or so to get into his books. He is very descriptive, very rich with detail, and so sometimes it really slowed me down, and I couldn't get in until the action of the story started happening. So I told myself, look, I want to get into it immediately and see what kind of reaction I get from that. And it's been pretty positive so far.
That's exactly what I did with the Rainblade. One of the issues that I had with Ready Player One is it took until I think about page 130 to really get me engaged with the story. When I was planning out the Rainblade, basically my philosophy was I wanted to get started and not stop. That's how I wrote it.
When I reviewed it, I think that was one of the things I had said about that, is that you dove right into the story. There was no wading through pages and pages of backstory to get to the action. It was that instant, here's what's going on. And I liked that about your story.
Oh, thank you. That was a very deliberate choice. And you know what's funny is you mentioned that analogy of the skeleton. I was just talking to my brother-in-law today. He's planning out a new project, and I want to be a part of it. I actually gave him that exact same description, the skeleton and then the meat, the organs, all that stuff. So that's actually really crazy when I was listening to you explain it, because I just explained that same thing to my brother-in-law.
It works. I mean, that's really what you're doing. So
yeah, the conclusion that we came to was, oh, then it's a baby that eats up all your time and money.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Now, Amber, I want to ask you, because as we go through the skeleton analogy here, do you send beta readers copies of it through your different drafts, or do you wait until the very end to send it out to your beta readers?
She is the worst at sending them out.
I take it Jason is a beta reader.
He is. Yes. I'm very lucky. I have Jason, and I have my husband, and I have my best friend Betsy, and between the three of them, I get some really amazing feedback. Like, this part completely sucks. I hate this character. I don't follow any of this part. It's really great though. So I do try to wait to send it out until I'm at a point where I've figured out and I've written through all of the major points, and I know, if something's really going to be a problem or not, so that I've made all the changes that I'm really going to make, and I'm really just looking to see if it's as good of a story as I think it is, and feedback on the characters and sort of the pace. Jason's really good at pointing out where I kind of pull back in certain stories, like I get right to the edge of it's going to be really exciting and I find something, and then I kind of and everything was okay. It wasn't a bad fight. Everything was fine, guys. Don't worry. And he's always like, no, you need to go for it. And so my writing's really improved with that. That's awesome when you have people like that will help you like that. So I don't remember what the question was.
I don't either.
I don't know where I was going with that. So.
As far as beta readers go, I think 3 is kind of like the magic number. It seems like we all kind of use that. And then from there, there's alpha readers and beta readers. And I think alpha readers are the ones who get the really rough drafts. And your beta readers are the ones who get the draft that's closer to production, or closer to editing, I should say. So do you have any alpha readers that you would use as well? Or is it just they're not going to see my work until it's close enough to editing?
No, the first book that I wrote was Falling, and I did release it. I got to a point where I could. I mean, I got stuck. I went as far as I could, and I had several people that offered to read it and gave me some really great feedback. Obviously, my husband and Betsy and Jason were the ones that stuck out. And then after that, I really did keep my drafts back until they were almost ready to edit, but partly because I want to just respect my beta readers' time. It's a lot of time. It's a big commitment. If you're really going to take the time and do it really well and take it really seriously, and I really appreciate that they do that. So I want to make sure that when I give them something, I'm giving them the best that I've got at the moment, and I'm really stuck in the mud for them to come in and help pull me out. So that's just kind of how I feel about it.
Now, with that, do you ever have to guide your beta readers? When I say guide, I have a worksheet that I tend to send out to beta readers just to give them an idea of what I'm looking for, rather than, getting back comments like, oh, this is wonderful, which is always nice to hear, or, general, that scene just kind of was crappy. Find more detail, fine tune it a little bit. What about the scene didn't you like? What about the scene worked?
I do send out like a question list that changes based on the project, but mostly I stick with questions of like, what did you really like? What did you really not like? Where were there areas where you were reading that it took you out of the story or struck you as unreasonable for the story? And so asking open-ended questions like that tends to get me more of the feedback that I'm looking for, rather than did you like it? Did you not like it? Sort of those yes or no questions, because really whatever stands out to them as being what they liked the most or was the most distracting, that's usually the direction that I need to go right back to and look at again anyway. So all the advice I've ever got from my beta readers has been pretty spot on. I don't always take it, as Jason knows, but it's usually pretty good and just a little bit guided, I guess, just to make sure that we're on the same page with everything I was hoping that I was getting across.
With my books, I just let them jump in with an open mind and no directions, because that way I feel that if there's an issue, it'll jump out at them, and that's what I need to correct.
So for me, and I beta read for a couple people, and I will be totally honest, when they send along their little email instructions on what they want me to look for, I don't even look at it. I don't read it. I don't read any kind of instructions for anything ever. So I'll just go through, and whenever we're writing, we're going to have grammatical errors and we're going to have typos and things like that. And as I'm going through, I will go and I'll kind of correct stuff, in whatever manner I know the author likes. For example, Alexia Purdy, I've beta read a few of her books, and she doesn't want you to look at any kind of spelling or grammar because, she has a copy editor that does that. But when I'm going through, I can't seem to help myself. If something pops out at me, I'll just make a note of it. With Amber, or with I beta read for another gal named Tara Eden. She writes a really great young adult fantasy series, and I'll just go through, and if there's things that really bug me, I'll just make a note of it and send it to her and say, hey, I really didn't like this. It didn't quite work for me. But as far as my own beta readers, I send out the obligatory email and say, hey, tell me which parts you thought were the strongest. Tell me which parts you thought were the weakest. Did you get to know the characters, that type of thing. But for the most part, they don't follow that at all. They just tell me what they want to tell me. And Amber will give me very detailed beta notes. Our friend Betsy, who reads for both of us on occasion, will give me more general notes. I really dislike this character and what he did or what she did. This scene wasn't very realistic. Let's fix that up. And so it's a little bit more general, still very helpful. And then I had another gal who beta read for me for the first time with my most recent novel, and she gave me almost 2 pages of notes. I never worked with her before. It was fantastic. And she happened to be a medical professional, and there was a lot of medical stuff that I had used in there, and she was, giving me some corrections and some good advice on how to use certain things. So if you let people kind of go on their own, they'll usually give you pretty good advice. But every once in a while, you'll get someone that just wants to say, hey, I really like the book. And then I'll have to write them back and say, can you be specific about a couple things for me? These are some areas that I might have thought were a little weak. Did you feel like they were weak? For example, my wife, it's weird having your wife beta read for you because they don't want to say things that are going to hurt your feelings, and because you have a personal relationship, that's a little bit more likely. But I'll tell her, this was a chapter that I really was struggling with. Be honest with me about this. Tell me what I did wrong here. And she'll just lay it out for me. I really hated that. It actually didn't need to be in the book at all. And that was the case with my last story. There was a whole chapter that was just, okay, that was kind of crap. And Amber actually knows that chapter too. She didn't like it either. But it's just one of those things where, as an author, you can't be too high and mighty. You can't be too attached to your things. And as many famous authors have said, and I actually have it tattooed on my arm, you must kill all your darlings. And it can sound kind of freaky and morbid, but to me it just means, even if you absolutely love something, you have to be willing to let it go if it's not right for your story.
I agree. In a way, your story is a living thing, and it's a two-way relationship, and you really have to listen to what it wants to be.
Definitely. So I have a question for you guys. Now, David, I haven't read The Rainblade. Is that a young adult or is that adult?
More adult. I would say you should be at least 16 to read it.
Okay. Now, I know that both Katie and Amber have written young adult, so this question will be more for you guys. And I'm asking it not only for myself personally, but so other authors can maybe glean some information out of it. I want to talk about sex and romance in young adult novels. Now, when I was a teenager, my favorite author was Christopher Pike. Oh my God, they were awesome. And part of the awesomeness was not just because they were fast moving and they were thrillers, but he had violence in there, and there were some love scenes as well. I don't remember them being especially graphic, but he talked about breasts and naked people and making out and things like that at that age, your parents don't really want you reading about. And so I guess my question for you two ladies is, when it comes to young adult fiction, for one, what is your target audience for that? And two, where do you go with your love scenes? Is it okay to have romance? Definitely it's okay to have romance, but what do you do when it comes to physical intimacy? Can they kiss? Can there be a fade to black sex scene? What's acceptable? And then, well, I'll wait for you to answer that, and then I have another tough one for you.
I don't know. Okay, so in the Hemlock Bay series, there's a romance, there's Bixby, and then there's Jordan. And so there is some kissing. There aren't any fade to black scenes there's no sex scenes. And it's not because it's young adult. I guess just for me, personally, being that age and reading those books, and then even growing older and choosing the books that I like to read, what I'm most comfortable reading about, it's just books that maybe aren't that heavy on that, I guess. I don't know. It's just a personal preference. I experiment with different ways of writing. I've published, other things under different names just to see what would happen or what they would be like. But I don't know. I guess I really haven't settled on a stance on that. I'm still trying new things out with every story that I write. So that's one of the things I'm kind of exploring as I go.
I actually asked that question to my readers while I've been working on the Little Werewolf series, because the Little Werewolf series is actually my only young adult series. The Chronicles is a new adult series. The Immortalis series is a new adult series.
Now, what does new adult mean?
The new adult is that college age level. So, and it's kind of a created title, because it used to be young adult and adult. And in the last few years, new adult became a title, and it was all the people who used to read young adult that have now grown into the new adult range. Mm-hmm. So it's still adult, but the title for it now is new adult. And in new adult, sex is completely acceptable. They're adults. They're consenting adults. They can do what they want. Though in one series, it just didn't feel right to have sex scenes, so there was none. There's some fade to black. There's less romance in that one, so it didn't need to have any physical intimacy. Whereas in the Immortalis series, there is some, because that book series, that storyline kind of needed it. Now, as far as the young adult goes, I had asked the question, what is acceptable as a reader, telling me, what do you want to see in these books? Can I mention condoms? Can I mention sex? Can I show sex? Can I give you a scene that has physical intimacy in it, and how graphic is acceptable? And the consensus that I got was graphic sex is a no-no. But mentioning things like condoms is actually something mothers appreciated, because children are reading about sex. They're learning about sex through what they're seeing in school and what they're reading in books and stuff, aside from what their parents, are teaching them. Mm-hmm. And seeing that as a positive, seeing condoms being a positive thing, aside from parents telling them that they should use condoms, is a good thing. It helps reinforce that belief. So they appreciated seeing condoms being mentioned in young adult. They were okay with kissing. They were okay with, mentioning of sex, because we all know, 16 and up, it's pretty much happening whether or not we know it or not. So they were okay with that as long as it wasn't graphic. And that's kind of what I took when I went to write the Little Werewolf series. Any intimacy between the main character and her love interest is kind of restrained, but I do make mention of some things, like the use of condoms and stuff.
Okay. And I don't ask because, we want to make creepy material. It's just what's going to make people uncomfortable, what's going to be realistic. It's been said that art is a reflection of life, or vice versa. And I really believe that's true. And like you just said, once kids are in the 15, 16 range, they're exploring physical intimacy, whether it's sex or making out or whatever it is they're doing, even just holding hands. One of a really fantastic book, and I would consider it young adult, is The Fault in Our Stars. And, for those of us who have read it or seen the movies, we know it's a really emotional drama, kind of a tearjerker. And there's a fade to black sex scene even in the movie. And these are with lead characters who are under the age of 18. And so I guess that's another question I have is that something that is very taboo to have, a 15, 16, 17-year-old character that's having sex? Or is that something that's acceptable, whether we write about it or not? Is that something that's going to be really offending people? Or are we going to try to embrace the reality of life and say, okay, well, this high school sophomore and this high school junior are physically intimate. They are having sex.
I think it depends on the setup. If it's like an actual love-based relationship, I think people aren't going to lash out as much as a bad boy trying to bang a bunch of girls.
Yeah.
Where it's more of a throwaway, another notch on the belt type of situation. I think that would definitely provoke a lot more people. But if you ground it in consension, or you ground it in, these people actually care for each other, I think people would go along with it a lot more. I think they'd accept it a lot more easily.
Those lines, though, if you have a character that is a bad boy, you have to be true to that character. And what would that character do? Now, I'm not saying you show graphic sex, in all of your scenes, but if that's something that character would do, I think the mention of it would be acceptable.
And, myself personally, I have a 17-year-old son, a 17-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old daughter, and a 7-year-old daughter. And I am very against censoring my kids as far as reading goes and literature. I was censored when I was younger, and I really was pretty resentful of it. Not because I wanted to read about graphic sex or graphic violence, but because I feel like we should be free to experience what we want to experience. But at the same time, being a dad, we also kind of want to protect our kids until we feel like they're the right age to experience these certain things. There's certain movies that I definitely won't let my 7-year-old watch because I don't want her to have nightmares, or because she's just not emotionally mature enough yet to see those movies or read those books. But I've always thought that was a really strange, grayish type of area. Talking about young adult versus new adult. If you look at the series, the Twilight series, would you call that young adult or new adult?
Young adult.
I would call it young adult myself. In the last book, probably the much anticipated marriage and sex scene finally emerges, and it was very low key and very fade to blackish. But I thought it was interesting that in a young adult book, they were finally saying, okay, well, they're having sex now, albeit at that point they had been married. So, but I don't know. It's always one of those where, do I want to go with what I think the character would really do, or do I not really want to piss off my readers? And I don't write young adult, but it might be something that I do in the future. And I just wanted you guys' take on it. So I appreciate you answering the question.
If you're asking for advice as opposed to what I personally choose to do, when it comes to young adult and it comes to sex scenes, I think the most important thing is how the authors deal with it before and after, and not necessarily the deed. You can fade to black if you want, you can describe it in very general terms or whatever, but really for your young adults and readers in that age group, there's so much going up to, those moments and those relationships with partners, and then there's so much afterwards. Is your mom going to find out? What do they think? They tell their friends, and what do I think? Did my friends know? And so I think that's why I don't treat it lightly, because I could throw a sex scene in there. I could have put one in Falling. It would have made sense for Bixby and Vernon to do that, but I wasn't ready, and that character in my writing just wasn't ready for everything that goes before and everything that goes after. If you really want to, treat that with the gravity that I think it deserves, especially when we're, writing for young adults, these are new experiences for them. Maybe they have no idea. They have no experience with this. And so I just think we need to treat, even though it's entertainment, even though we're just writing stories, it's important to treat it seriously, because we are reaching out to young people with our books, or just, other adults or whatever. It's just, it pays to treat the serious things seriously, even if we're going to be graphic or violent or whatever about it. I guess that's just how I feel about it.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Well, some people even thought that Edward and Bella's relationship is abusive.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Stalkerish.
Definitely.
I know she was mean to him all the time.
Jason and Amber, did you want to give away a book this week?
I do. I actually have advanced copies of The Dark of Night, which is my new horror thriller. Kind of a combination between horror and kind of a ghost story. And so I have a lot of ebook copies I'm happy to give away to people. All they need to do is drop me a line either on Facebook or at my email address. I'd be happy to send you a copy. All that I ask is that you please leave me a review when you get a chance, because we authors really, really love them.
Absolutely.
Yep, I'll give away a couple books. I just actually finished formatting my whole box set for my first series.
Okay, so what we'll do then is we'll put that in our weekly giveaway list, and there'll be a link at the bottom of the video so that viewers can sign up. We'll pick 3 winners, and then once we've got those winners, we'll announce it on the next available show. That's all we've got this week on Spilling Ink. I want to say a special thank you again to Amber and Jason for being our guests. We're happy to have you with us again this week. Jason, we're going to bring you back a few more times. You're just too much fun. And Amber, thank you as well for being here, and thanks for lending your advice on the young adult topic. That was really good.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
For everybody else who's watching, make sure to give us a thumbs up, like this video, subscribe to our channel for future videos, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye, guys. Thanks for having me on again.
Bye.